So let's get into what the secrets were to my success early on in my Amazon selling career. And again, I hope that these are very helpful to you, whether you're on that first rung, you're selling a couple thousand, maybe you're just getting started, or you're hitting maybe that $100,000 a month level. So what I started doing early on, and this is what I encourage all folks who just get into selling online on Amazon. Most of the time, you have more time and you have less capital. That was my situation. So my situation was my wife and I, we were deep in debt just through some really dumb consumer spending. We did not want to go back in debt. So we were able to pay all that off. And then 2 years after paying that off, we had a little bit of money and we realized that we had to create another income, but we didn't have a lot of capital. So what did I do? I started to acquire inventory that was more difficult to get. So inventory like at auctions, inventory at garage sales. So if you find yourself in this situation where you have more time and less capital, my encouragement to you is you really got to grind it out, and it's going to take longer to find inventory like this, but generally your ROI is going to be higher and your cost of goods are going to be lower. So some of the early things that I purchased early on was a lot of dead tech. So, there is some dead tech out there that is still extremely valuable. The manufacturers stopped making it. I purchased a lot at an online auction for $30, and it had about 40 of these mini DVR recorders. I was able to flip those on eBay. So a lot of for $30 had about 40 of these DVR, and each recorder sold for about $250 each. So that immediately infused a huge amount of capital right into my business. And so if you're just starting out, just know again that you might have to weigh those where you have less capital, but it's going to take you more time. So if you want to call that bootstrapping, maybe you call it that. But that's my encouragement to you is find that inventory that is going to be a little hard to acquire, and it may take you more time, but it's going to give you better ROI, and it's going to hopefully infuse more capital and cash into your business. Because as we know, cash and capital is king in an inventory-based business. We sell inventory. The only way you and I make money is if we have profitable inventory. The only way we acquire that profitable inventory is if we have money to be able to purchase it. Okay. So don't sleep on eBay. It's still a very good sales channel if you're starting out, and you actually can sell used items on Amazon as well. You just have to list them properly. But that was one of my secrets, I think, that really helped me start to level up in my business. The second thing that I think we did right is we didn't put money on credit cards. So my wife and I both in the beginning were like, hey, we want to build a real business. We were risk averse because of what we had went through personally. So we said, hey, you know what? We're just going to use cash, right, that we make in the business, and we're going to put it back into the business, and we're not going to use credit cards. Unfortunately, I've seen too many newer Amazon sellers get upside down because they're using credit cards. So it is slippery. And those of you that have been selling for a while, you know that keeping track, right, of your financials in an inventory-based business, and especially with Amazon and all the fees, and then you start using the third-party apps, that you're are coming out. It can be very tricky to get down to the nitty-gritty of what your net profit is. And so again, if you're just starting out, I caution against using credit cards. Figure out how to do it. There may come a time, right, where your business is stable and you have these steady sources, right, of inventory. So when I started out, I had a route, and I knew then by about the 18th month of my Amazon business, I knew I had a pretty good idea of how much money, right, that I could make just by going through my route, hitting my honey holes. And once you do that, you may then decide, right? Again, it's your business, your choice, where you become comfortable with using credit cards. Obviously, we always say you got to pay those things off every month because the interest rate is so high. So just be careful with that. Again, I think one of the foundational pieces to our success is we stayed away from it. We were able to see that we had a real business because our sales continued to grow, and it was just all by putting the cash back in the business. So that's the second secret. The third third thing goes right along with that. I snowballed all the profits back into the business. And you'll hear Gary and Gay, they'll talk about this frequently. Like, look, don't eat your seed, right? So often sellers come in and, especially if you start selling around Q4 and you start to see your Amazon account get built up. And then all of a sudden you start to see leakage because you're taking money that you're making from your business and you start buying personal items with it instead of investing it and wanting your business to grow. So snowball your profits back into your business for as long as possible. And again, this may be challenging and may be hard, but if you want to build a business that can scale, right, where you hit that $1 million, $2 million, $3 million mark, and you're just starting off, highly encourage you put that profit back in and let the baby grow, right? Don't start to take away from it early on. So that's the third thing. Fourth thing is I started utilizing part-time help. So this goes back to the 4 quadrants that we talked about. So early on, I realized, holy cow, Amazon, right, is a lot of work. Those of you that are just starting, I hope you know what you're getting into. It is blue collar work as an inventory-based business, right? When you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, I saw that early on. So some of the first things I started selling were books. And I would buy these huge gaylords of books from these donation companies, right, that have the bins around. They delivered them to my house. One time I ordered 4 of them. So, this big like moving truck pulls up. They dump off these 4 big gaylords. And it took me about a month to go through all these books, and my lower back, no lie, it was jacked up for about a year after doing those just 4 gaylords of books. Now I have a little bit of lower back issues, but because you're in those bins, you got to wear gloves because the books are kind of dirty and nasty. So you're digging, you're going through, and it was at that moment, this was very early on in my business, that I realized, you know what? Like, why am I doing this? Like, I should be paying somebody, back then, $12, $13 an hour. And I should be out using my time to acquire more profitable inventory. So that's when the light bulb went on for me. Like, Andy, you're never going to be able to scale if you're spending all of your time digging through books like this. So if you're spending all of your time prepping and packing, if you're spending all your time labeling and taping and taking stickers off, I knew that I was never going to be able to scale to the level that I wanted to scale my business to. So early on, what I started to do is I started to utilize part-time help. And so I actually had high school kids that I had relationships with. And so I would say, hey, look, and I would give them easy tasks. I would systematize it. And so they then became my preppers and packers. And I started utilizing my time to find more profitable inventory. Then I would give it to them and they would prep it and pack it for me. That was a much more efficient use of my time. And so if you have not got to that level yet, again, maybe you're just starting out. I just want you to include that right now in the back of your mind that you are going to get to the level where your business is going to hit a ceiling if you don't utilize other people to do the prepping and packing, the labeling, the taping, and sending it into Amazon. Your time is more valuable than that. Your time should be used in sourcing, all right? Because this is the key. In order to scale, again, if you just want a part-time business, you can do this. There's a lot of sellers here in the Amazon seller tribe who it is their part-time business, but they created systems, right, to be able to scale. This is what I love about Gary. He's a multi-million-dollar seller on Amazon, but he knew that his time was more valuable than that. So he created a system and he has a team that does that work for him. And then he manages them. All right. Early on, because of those dumb books that broke my lower back, I realized, hey, if I want to scale, I cannot be the jack of all trades in my business. I need to be out there acquiring profitable inventory and then letting other people send it in. So, and a lot of times I'll get resistance for folks that are selling on Amazon that are newer. They'll be like, man, I don't want to manage people. And I'm like, well, if you don't want to manage people, just realize, again, what you're going to do is create yourself a job. And, in your business, a good friend of mine, Greg Murphy, he calls it, you don't have a bus-proof business, because if you get hit by a bus, if I were to get hit by a bus back in those days, my business would have just went flat, right? There's nobody picking it up at all, depending on me. What you want to be able to do is build a system. You're going to have to manage people, right? So I suggest, right, early on, again, look for friends, look for family. Again, it's not the ideal situation. When we moved to our home, right, I had 2 full-time students. They just graduated high school, but they were working with me. And sometimes it gets a little icky, because they're using our bathroom. They're working out of our home. Thankfully, again, we had a decent relationship with them, but I knew it was just a bridge. I knew eventually I was going to get a warehouse, but I knew I had to bridge sometimes. So thankfully, my wife was very good, and she allowed them to kind of come in, because you're really sharing your house, right, with your employees. But you know what? What that does too is it allows you to stay lean, right? So again, what I knew, I didn't want to start paying warehouse storage fees. I don't want to start paying a monthly rent and everything that goes along with that. So I was willing to sacrifice a little bit of my personal comfort. Thankfully, again, my wife was as well, so that we could stay lean and keep building up that business. So again, understand that you're going to have to get a team if you really want to scale up, if you want to systematize it, and if you want to go from being an employee owning a job to owning a business. So my 5th secret that I really like is I leaned heavily on list leads. So this is why I love the list that Gay puts out early on in my career as I'm learning Amazon, learning the ecosystem. I needed to have lists, right, that were emailed to me that I could see very easily what those were and then make buys on those. Again, it is a time thing. So I wanted to scale up. How am I going to scale up? I got to acquire profitable inventory. I only have a certain amount of time going into stores. Back then, I didn't have any shoppers, right? There weren't very many people back then that actually had folks shopping for them. And so my time was very limited. And so I leaned heavily on OA lists, and super thankful for them, because there were many of them that helped me buy products that increased, again, right, my profitability of my Amazon business early on. Now, one thing that I did different, and everybody has different ways they run their business, right? And so I often say, it's your business, your choice. What I would do, right, with my list is I would be I would put a very high filter on items that I would purchase. And so many times I would be subscribed to these lists, and I would only buy 1 or 2 items a month from the list, right? So I'm paying $100 a month, right, for a list, and I'm getting it every day, but I only buy 1 or 2 items. Why would I do that? For me, again, this was kind of my philosophy of business. I like to go deep on products that I'm confident I can be very profitable on. So I got to a point in my business where it was a struggle for me just to buy 2 or 3 items, right? Because then you had to separate it, send it in a different warehouse. I always wanted to buy 18 or more. So with these OA lists, I would be very careful and my filter would be high, but I would go through them. And again, I would buy 1 or 2 items. And that 1 or 2 items would often pay for the list 5 or 6 times over. And that to me is the power, right, of OA list. And so whether you have a shallow and wide, which I love, that's a lot more risk adverse, or you may say, maybe you go somewhere in the middle. For me, I love to find products, study that Keepa chart, kind of analyze, right, what happens if a lot of sellers come in on this? How long am I potentially going to have to hold this item? And then I like to make very deep buys. In fact, back then, I would try to buy out that product, depending on where it was. I definitely would try to go heavy and hard and try to buy out the products. That's how I use my list. But the key is this. As you are beginning, right, I highly encourage you, if you're beginning, you want to subscribe to OA List, because they're going to help you find profitable inventory. And so that's another offering here, right, that we do in the tribe. And I think we are the only team that I know of where a person from our team, flew out and worked right with this team, stayed with them, had dinner with them, and taught them right face to face in person, which is why we actually meet with this team every week as well. So they do a phenomenal job. If you're not subscribed to an OA leads list, especially going into Q4, I highly encourage you. Again, these lists of finders, they do a phenomenal job. And this was a huge way that I was able to build my business early on.